Hey guys, welcome back. Today we're going to talk about taking cuttings from your raspberry bush to make more raspberry plants. So you might be asking yourself, why are we in the greenhouse if we're going to be taking raspberry cuttings? Well, the first step in taking your raspberry cuttings is getting your pots ready. Now, you're always going to want to soak your pots for a few hours before you take your raspberry cuttings. So I know we've been doing quite a few videos on taking cuttings and making new plants from these cuttings. And in the majority of cases, I'm putting those cuttings in water and then waiting to see which ones root the best and then plant those. But that doesn't work so well with raspberries. Raspberry cuttings seem to like a little bit more air, and so they seem to do better instead of going into water and waiting for the roots to come, going directly into the pots that you're going to grow them in. And so that's why we pre-soak the pots. So now that we know that, let's head over to the raspberry patch and I'll show you how to actually take the cuttings. Okay, so here we are at the raspberry patch, ready to take our cuttings. But first things first, what do we need to do our cuttings? Well, you need a good pair of scissors or secateurs. Need a pair of gloves because most raspberries have thorns on them. And you need a bucket of water. You know, we don't want to be running back to the greenhouse every time we cut a shoot to plunk it in one of those pots. So we just plunk them all in this bucket of water here, and then when we're ready, we'll take them all back to the greenhouse and plant them. So before you get started, there's a couple things you need to know. Yes, there is a optimal time of year to take your raspberry cuttings, and that optimal time of year is right now. Well, right now when I'm filming this, who knows when you're watching it. Late summer. You want to take your cuttings late summer, and there's a couple reasons for this, and we'll get into that later. The other thing is with raspberries, there's 3 different kinds of shoots, and only 2 of them work with cuttings. So let's quickly run down the types of raspberry shoots and what you're going to need to look for when you take your cuttings. So in a typical raspberry bush, there are 3 different kinds of shoots. And so I'll point out the first one, and this is the one you do not want to take cuttings from. And it's fairly obvious, and it's the reason why you take cuttings at this time of year, because it's easy to differentiate from the other shoots. So what you have right here, they'll essentially look dead, and they pretty much are. That is what's called a Floricane. So a Floricane in your raspberry patch will be the shoots that flowered early on. Now your next type of shoot, these are the golden boys. These are what we call Primocanes. So they are this year's shoots. They are also next year's Floricanes. And so these guys are prime candidates from taking shoots from. And that's what I'll be doing today. Now in the land of raspberries, there's a third shoot. And these are what we call suckers. Well, suckers are the tiny little shoots that are just coming out of the ground. And they can come out of the ground at any time of the year. And you can use these to make cuttings at any time of the year. You can also dig them up because they'll already have their own root system. So suckers are great for taking new plants from. It's also great for thinning your patch. So this is an example of a good sucker here. I might take shoots from those, but I do prefer the Primocanes simply because you seem to get a head start. Yeah, they're not rooted, but they're bigger, and they do contain flowering material ready to flower the next coming spring so that you have a bumper crop of Floricane raspberries. So when I'm doing raspberries, I always do them into gallon pots. There's no point doing them into 4-inch pots. They will quickly outgrow it, and I usually leave them in the pots over winter. There simply isn't enough time for them to root and then go back into the ground this fall. So they're going to stay in those pots for up to 8 months. So gallon pots is the optimal size. Now I usually do 2 shoots per pot. We know we have 4 pots soaking, so we need to grab 8 Primocane shoots. So got 1. So You're going to want one with at least 5 nodes, because when I plant them, I want to plant them 2 nodes deep, right? So 1 node, 2 node. Because when you pull these guys off, it leaves the scar tissue there. And that scar tissue is usually where the new roots pop out of. So if you do it with 5 nodes, you know that if you bury the bottom 2 nodes, you still have 3 growth nodes on the top. Okay, so now I got our 8 shoots. Let's go plant them in the pots. Okay guys, now we're ready for the last part, and that's putting the shoots in the pot. It's super easy, but there's a couple things you want to remember. Now, one, you don't want the shoot to be too tall. So this shoot, yeah, might be a bit tall. So it'll still give us 1, 2. We'll take that leaf off for 3 nodes buried, and we'll cut it right there. Okay. Okay, so shoots aren't too tall. Perfect. Now the other thing you want to remember, now a lot of times when people are planting things, they'll make a hole for their stalk or whatever they're planting to go into. Don't do that with these guys. If you do make a hole, it can actually make an air pocket in the soil, and it can mean that the stem itself doesn't have access to the moist soil to send its roots out into, and that shoot could die. So what you want to do is simply place it straight down, all the way to the bottom, just like that. And so we're doing 2 per pot. We'll put the other one right beside it. And I'll go ahead and do them all. So that's pretty much it from taking raspberry cuttings. It's going to take a couple of weeks for the roots to take hold. You know, you can take a little tug on the stem just to see how they're doing. Also, the ones that don't make it will start to wilt, so watch that. But raspberry cuttings want to root. They're a very, almost like a weed for lack of a better word. So usually there's a 100% success rate if you pick the right Primocanes or suckers to put in your pots. The other thing to remember is you want to be doing this in late summer, because you want to make sure that you're picking the Primocane shoots and not the Floricanes. Always use a gallon pot. It's the perfect size. It's why you always see them sold in nurseries in gallon pots. Don't fight it. Just use gallon pots. It's the right size. Pre-soak your soil so that you're not putting roots into dry soil, because that can really hamper your success. Make sure you're burying the shoots 2 to 3 nodes deep. That will maximize the amount of roots you get and maximize the potential of the plant in the future. And last but not least, always take your own cuttings. Fruit plants are some of the most expensive plants in the nursery. I've seen raspberry plants going for $14, $15 for a spindly little shoot in a gallon pot. Don't pay those prices. Once you have an established berry patch, you'll never need to buy a raspberry plant again. That's it for today, guys. As always, leave any questions or comments down below. Click subscribe if you haven't already. For those of you that have, I really do appreciate the support, and I'll see you next time.